Recording in progress. Just make sure one other thing here.
How many years were your parents married? Or your dad?
42. 42.
Not enough.
Yeah, not
A
enough.
lot of
But
reasons.
yeah, they just a few weeks before he passed away. It was their 42nd anniversary. Was there that day. Thought things were getting better. That's what happens sometimes. Okay. Just sending Steve Smith a message. Okay, I sent him a message. Please sees it. Okay. All right. Hello, Michael. How are you? Thank you. I got it. Okay, so last week we had discussed we read the introduction of the Mishnah Brura, which is a whole column over here. The introduction to this to Siman Reish Mem Chet. This introduction outlined for us, I think, at least 5 different ways that you could understand what is the problem here with traveling by boat 3 days before Shabbos. If it's not a Dvar Mitzvah, if it's just for your own, for we call it Dvar Rishus, you want to go because you want to go for whatever reasons. You could say that work is maybe not a Dvar Mitzvah. That may be a debatable subject. Yeah, having the bottom line livelihood of putting food on the table may be a Dvar Mitzvah. I don't want to talk about that quite yet. But if it was a Dvar Mitzvah that you were going for with some sort of mitzvah purpose, then even Erev Shabbos was okay to set sail. So it's a straight up brisa in the Gemara. So the question that Rishonim were grappling with was how to explain the reasoning behind this. And it's interesting, very rarely do we see that the reason behind something really matters. At the end of the day, halacha is a halacha, and the reason for something doesn't always really matter or factor in. Here, this will factor in, and I think even in a practical way, I'm just reading some of the extra explanations I have on the side, or additions, I should say, I have on the side here, from the postscript of the 20th century, with regards to travel that was a lot quicker. What about train travel? What about an airplane? Can you not fly on an airplane 3 days before Shabbos? That would be ridiculous in some ways because Jews do it all the time. So how do we transpose the halacha that we see in the Shulchan Aruch based on the Gemara to our modern day travel situations? And so here the reason is going to matter. The Shulchan Aruch is really going to follow in the footsteps of the Rif, who explained the Gemara as saying that the whole problem here is it's about owning Shabbos. If I travel by sea, and here's really going to matter how they travel by sea, not like at our day and age, as some of the poskim said, our boats, our ships are much more sophisticated. We don't travel based on wind. We don't use the sail to push the boat this way. We have an engine, or we have I don't know. I'm not sure how boats if you have a cruise liner, or how does the ship move? It's just it's an engine, right? The propeller, right? The turbine, right? They didn't have that. No, they didn't have that in terms of the Gemara. They had sea travel was a much more complicated, very wobbly experience. And because of the seasickness that would often accompany, apparently, those who travel by sea, the Rifs explained 3 days before Shabbos, you shouldn't do it because you would still feel sick on Shabbos. Not everybody, but enough that it was in a gzeira that you should avoid such a thing. But if it was a Dvar Mitzvah, so go mitzvah, you'll feel a little queasy on Shabbos. And the whole problem here that we're worried about is you won't have your meal on Shabbos. You won't enjoy Shabbos. So This is the basis upon which the Shulchan Aruch is built. The other factor that's at play is something the Baal Hamor brings up, which is 3 days before Shabbos. That belongs to the coming Shabbos, right? But even you can make Havdalah until Tuesday night, right? Once it's Yom Revi'i, we turn our attention to the next Shabbos. But the first 3 days of the week, they belong to the previous Shabbos. And so when it comes to the idea of where am I going to put myself in a Chilul Shabbos situation, on Monday, I don't have to ask myself that question. That's the Baal Hamor's understanding. 3 days before Shabbos, I have to start thinking about, are the decisions I'm going to make today affecting my ability to keep Shabbos? So those two factors, the Rif and the Baal Hamor, those two opinions are going to play out here. The Rif is the main opinion, but we'll see some Baal Hamor is sprinkled in here in the background. Okay, so with that in mind, those explanations in mind, that will, I think, help us understand this siman, and I'll make some points as we go along in terms of how this also plays out in our own world today of different travel methods of travel than they had in those days. Okay, let's read. The Shulchan Aruch begins in Reish Mem Ches. So you have to turn your page if you packet. So it said Yud Beis on the top. Mutter lahaflig b'sfina. Afilu be'erev Shabbos im holech l'dvar mitzvah. It is permissible to set sail on a boat, even on Erev Shabbos, if you are going for the purposes of a mitzvah. Now, who is running this boat? The implication is that it's run, that it is being that it is being sailed by a non-Jew. Upos taking Moshe Yishbos. So you make a stipulation when you buy your ticket, or you buy his services. You're supposed to stipulate that on Shabbos, I don't want you to sail. I want you to just yishbos, rest. Don't do anything. I don't want you to, do things on my behalf. Okay. V'imachar lo yishbos. If at the end of the day the non-Jew doesn't listen to that stipulation, so ein bekach klum. So okay, it is what it is, and you keep going. Nothing, but you did your part. You told them I don't want you to do it on Shabbos. Fine. By the way, this is following in the opinion of Rebbe in that brisa. Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel was of the opinion that you don't even need to make this whole condition with the non-Jew. You don't have to worry. For various reasons, you don't need to worry. Okay. So
if he has cargo, he has to get it someplace at a certain date. He wants to keep sailing for his own schedule.
Correct. He's probably got his own reason. Other passengers, the other this. Exactly. He says, okay, fine. Go take your seat, and I gotta do my thing. Yeah. Okay. Good morning. At the same time. Okay. We are just in the first line of Reish Mem Ches in the Shulchan Aruch. Okay. Aval l'dvar harishus, but if I'm going for my own purposes, not for a mitzvah purpose, ein mafligin b'sfina pachos mishlosha yomim kodem haShabbos. I am not supposed to set sail on that boat less than 3 days, but the 3 days prior to Shabbos. As we talked about, the main reason that we're going to see here is going to be because of Bittul Oneg Shabbos going to come into play, that Oneg Shabbos will be ruined. Okay, let's take a look here at the first 5 comments of the Mishnah Berurah, beginning with Aleph. Afilu be'erev Shabbos, that you're allowed to set sail on Erev Shabbos. Hainu af bevadai lo yikayim Oneg Shabbos al yedei zeh, even if it's going to ruin my Oneg Shabbos for sure. I know I am a seasick person. I ever go on a boat, I get seasick. Particularly, again, we're talking about not the fancy cruise liner that's going to start wobbling and tilting. We're talking about a boat that has the wind blew it this way, it blew it that way. You were going on a roller coaster ride. Is the Mechaber is going to write it. Even so, it's okay, even if I'm going to end up feeling a little sick on Shabbos. Because for mitzvah purposes, and we paskin the ostek of mitzvah. But if you're engaged in one mitzvah, you're exempted from another mitzvah. And again, here we're talking about a positive mitzvah. The positive mitzvah being Oneg Shabbos. How does Oneg Shabbos manifest itself? Oh, it's not It's not too wishy-washy. Only Shabbos manifests itself by the things that we do on Shabbos that are enjoyable. Kavod Shabbos is how you prepare for Shabbos, right? The meal, the candles, this. Oneg Shabbos is on Shabbos that you're enjoying the day, the meal, the food, right? You can have a baseline meal, but part of the mitzvah of Oneg Shabbos is have some meat and some fish, whatever, spice it up. So that won't happen, but we say that I'm engaged in a mitzvah, so I'm potter from the other mitzvah. Okay. And certainly you don't need to ask if the boat is traveling in a place that is deeper, the water is deeper than 10 tvachim, which is nothing. It's like 3 feet. The mutter we don't need to, it's mutter, you don't need to worry about violating the idea of traveling outside of the tchum. The kaim alam, because we paskin, ein tchumin lamala me'asara tvachim. There is no halacha of tchum higher than 10 tvachim. So if the seabed is here, the boat is higher than 10 tvachim, we paskin that there's no tchum up in the air. Tchum is a land halacha. But the moment you start talking about things in the air, or in this case, above, not sea level, but above seabed level, then you don't need to worry about the halacha of tchum. Tchum is a land halach. That's what the Gemara clarifies. So you're technically getting around that here because the boat is 10 tefachim above the seabed.
So we can fly.
So correct, you would not be violating the Isra of Tchum according to this opinion. Believe me, there's a machlokas on this issue. The poet Mishnah Berurah is presenting this here, not a machlokas, which is surprising in and of itself. But this is not a straightforward issue. And the answer to the plain is that maybe there is no issue of Tchum. That is correct. There'll be other issues though.
That's a whole
there's an engine with a fire there.
That's the idea
Yes.
behind the Shabbos elevator then. Because you're just going up. You're not going horizontally. You're traveling, but you're
I don't know if you could hear him this question. She was just asking in terms of a Shabbos, pointing out in terms of a Shabbos elevator, there should not be an issue of tchum. I mean, the answer is if the elevator anyways is in the city, you're not worried about it anyways, tchum. But you're saying if you were theoretically you were outside of your city, and you end up somewhere and there's an elevator going up, the problem is you have to start zero. Oh, going just straight up.
right.
Maybe you're right. It's like the plane, like Steve had said. You know, in some ways you're out. You know, you don't have to worry about the tchum because it's not a halacha that applies there. That's a very rare situation though, that you're going to find yourself outside that has an elevator.
Well, in a resort hotel or something.
In a hotel, right? But again, if you're already in the hotel before Shabbos,
Right.
that's
okay.
you're already there. You have to travel somewhere else and then go up an elevator. So probably not a realistic scenario, but it's theoretically correct. Yes. Okay. Continuing here in the Mishnah Berurah. Ella afilu yesh mekomos shamayim mu'atim pachos me'asar tefachim. And yes, it's true. There are some places, particularly I guess because you get close to the edge of the water, right? You get to the bank, you know, to the seashore. Then sometimes the water is less than 10 tefachim. Gam kein mutar latzes be'erev Shabbos hasina. Even so, forget the tchum issue. Kev and shul dvar mitzvah. Since it's for the mitzvah purposes, we allow you to do it. Which is not a very simple answer, by the way. The tchum is according to many an issur d'oraisa. So how can you travel outside the tchum on Shabbos? Here you'd be violating the issur of tchum. To just simply say it's a dvar mitzvah is not so simple. The introduction we saw to the Mishnah Berurah last week tries to deal with this question. But anyways, usually you're as he says here, you try to get the non-Jew to do it, right? The non-Jew is the one who's moving the ship. The non-Jew, so again, if you try to minimize it, so now you're knocking it down to a Derabanan where the non-Jew is doing it. It's just Amir L'Nochri. So then it's only an Issa Derabanan, and so maybe the rabbis say even L'Dvar Mitzvah, it's Mut. You have to say something, you know, because otherwise it doesn't make sense. You can't just violate Tchum because it's a Dvar Mitzvah. Tchum is an Issa D'Oraisa. You can't just knock away the Torah because you're doing a mitzvah over here. So you have to say something a little bit more than this. And again, the end of the Mishnah Berurah's introduction does deal with this question. He says, look, you're doing it Ali Day Nochri, so therefore there's room to be lenient. It's already down to a Darabah. Okay. Let's go to base. Uposekimo, you have to stipulate with the captain that don't set sail on Shabbos. Kosav Magen Avram, the Shabbos also lahaflik afil dvar mitzvah. The Magen Avram said on Shabbos it's prohibited. Here he's working on the point of that on Shabbos, because it doesn't talk about what about on Shabbos. The Brisa dealt with Erev Shabbos 3 days before. What about on Shabbos? So the Magen Avram writes on Shabbos it's usher to set sail, even for a dvar mitzvah. What's the problem with setting sail on Shabbos? You can't make the stipulation because you're making a deal. Deals on Shabbos, right? You're probably paying X. Here's the $20 bill. That's my ticket or whatever for on a literal ticket. But it's here. Do this job for me. I need to get from A to B. But you can't start making deals with somebody on Shabbos. You're stipulating, but not on Shabbos. Don't set sail. So he doesn't. So he's not enamored with this idea, and so that's why you can't do this on Shabbos. Just looking here. So he continues and says, some want to say that even for a dvar mitzvah, it is mutter. And he says, take a look at the Shari Tshuva and the Chai Adam as well. I'll quote you a little bit of the Chai Adam. Chai Adam's case is what happens if it's Rosh Hashanah. You're not supposed to travel on Yom Tov either. What if it's Rosh Hashanah? And in order to get the shofar, you need to get in the boat, to get over there, to get the shofar, bring it back, or whatever. Or you need to hear the shofar. Nobody in your town has a shofar, so you want to go. Excuse me. You want to set sail down the shore to the next town. Can you do this? So the Chai Adam and his relative. What's the connection again? Great.
My grandfather's grandfather.
Grandfather's grandfather. If you can't get a shofar any other way, you can set sail on Rosh Hashanah to go from one town. You're not the one sailing the boat, but you get on the boat on Shabbos, and obviously you're not paying the money. You're probably saying, "I'll take care of you later," and I knew you can go get your shofar. It's saying lama shekasav the kamam. He says the same thing here about the mitzvah of sukkah. You can't be mekayim the mitzvah of sukkah. You need to go somewhere else to get the sukkah, and there's no other way. Anyways, the Sharat Sion, though, he's Tamamashu Mekor HaMakil. The Sharat Sion is, I don't know what the real source for how to be lenient on this is. They were being lenient. He said the Chayyadim was being lenient here. He said, I'm not sure why. It's unclear. Again, why would you think it's okay? It's like engaging in a business transaction on Shabbos. No, I don't know. Anyways, don't find yourself in such a situation where you need to do such a thing on Shabbos. It's not so simple to be lenient. Okay. Gimel, sheyishbos beinshu. So the idea that you're supposed to tell him to rest, don't do anything on Shabbos. Whether he set sail on Friday or on earlier in the week. If it's within the 3 days before Shabbos, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, I have to tell the guy, please don't sail the boat on Shabbos. So do whatever you have to do on Shabbos. You should really refrain from malacha. And they'll look at you like, what's malacha? Okay, you'll explain to them. The Sefer Ola Shabbos nistapek. The Sefer Ola Shabbos is not sure. Let's say, what happens in a situation where you're not able to make such, you can't go up to the captain and say, can you just make sure not to sail on Shabbos? Up front, he tells you, we're going from here to there. Here's the itinerary. I have lots of passengers. This is impossible. So don't ask for any special favors. If you want to buy a ticket, here's the plan. Is that preventing us from setting sail or not? Can I not go on such a boat? The majority of the Achronim ultimately decide the hapsika hu rak lemitzvah be'alma v'lo ma'akev, ve'ena ma'akev. That the whole idea of psika, of like making this condition, making sure that you make it clear what you're not comfortable with, it's just a mitzvah. Meaning it's a cherry on top, as I would put it. Meaning you're supposed to do this, but if you don't do it, it doesn't prevent you from being able to go on the boat. The Sharat Sir at the bottom has a little bit of a few lines here. And this goes back to the Machlokas Rebbe and Rabbi Shimon Gamliel. Rebbe, interestingly, who was he the son of? Rabbi Yehuda Nasi was the son of Rabbi Shimon Gamliel. So we have a Machlokas. I didn't realize this when I was reading it initially, but it's father and son having a Machlokas. We paskin, according to the Shulchan Aruch, we paskin like the son. Many Arishonim paskin like the father. The reason is because usually the rule is we paskin like Rebbe Mechavi Rav. We usually paskin like Rabbi Yehuda Nasi against his friends. If it's like him against one other person, if it's him against the majority, then not necessarily. But here they cutely quote the halacha Rabbi Shimon Gamliel neged Rebbe, the halacha Rebbe Mechavero below me'aviv. We paskin like Rebbe against his friends, but not against his father. And here his father says you don't need to whole condition. Whatever happens. So here, so much that that it was impossible to make such a stipulation that you please don't travel on Shabbos, because at the end of the day, maybe we don't paskin like that opinion anyways in the Gemara, because maybe we paskin the Iker hadin like Rabbi Shimon Gamliel. It's nice to be from like Rebbe, and it's a mitzvah to take the extra step, but maybe it's not necessary according to the letter of the law. Okay, that's it's not so relevant in some practical sense, but in the sense that you have a rule at how we paskin, and sometimes there are exceptions to the rule, and how just understand the logic behind the exceptions. Okay, Dalet. Let's take a look at the next one. Pachos mishlosha yomim. Setting sail less than 3 days before Shabbos. Da'ainu b'yom revi b'Shabbos osur. Okay, that would be the understanding, is that starting on Wednesday, it will be prohibited for a dvar rishus. Aval hagra hevi b'shem harbe rishonim. The Vilna Gaon, quoting a number of rishonim, says the hashlosha yomim nechshav im haShabbos kufa. They interpret the Gemara as 3 days includes Shabbos. It's a bit of a chiddush. V'yom harvi mutter. And on Wednesday, that would mean that it would be mutter to set sail, according to the Vilna Gaon, commenting in the name of many rishonim. The Vilna Gaon, apparently, I didn't look this up, but apparently he has some Yerushalmis to quote and some Toseftos to quote in his corner. It's interesting, though, that if you take the approach that 3 days before Shabbos belongs to the coming Shabbos, like the Baal Hamor, then this falls apart. Obviously, the Baal Hamor doesn't agree with, the Vilna Gaon wasn't probably quoting the Baal Hamor in this one, but he did want to give you a few opportunities for a kula if you need it. Again, I'm not sure how we paskin, as a matter of practical halacha, because this is not a practical question, as we'll see in a moment, that we deal with so much today. Hey, kodem Shabbos, v'hu adin kodem Yom Tov. No reason that we should to make a differentiation between Shabbos and Yom Tov. The Yom Tov and Shabbos shavim, v'chein b'Yom Tov sheni ein mafligin. Yom Tov and Shabbos are the same, and even Yom Tov sheni, we don't set sail on Yom Tov sheni. Maybe you have Havamina. I have these extra comments here. They try to explain maybe why do you have to even say Yom Tov Sheni? Maybe because Yom Tov Sheni is everybody loves to remind me all the time. Yom Tov Sheni is the worst thing that ever happened to the Jewish people, and it's a minhag of our forefathers that they kept the second day, which I always respond, but they knew that and they still kept it. Right? It wasn't the suffix about the calendar thing. People always bring it up. The Gemara already knew about the suffix in the calendar. They knew there was no suffix anymore. They set the calendar, and yet even so, the Gemara says that they kept the meaning of their forefathers. That's why it's not a debatable matter where I can come in and change it, because the rabbis in the Talmud already decided that we're not changing it. That was the halacha. So I always to them. That's not my fault. So But the bottom line is that Yom Tov Sheni, the Gzeir of Yom Tov Sheni, if you really study it very carefully, the Gzeira of Yom Tov Sheni is that it's supposed to be treated like Yom Tov Rishon. Yes, it's a whole suffix, and it's really not the day, suffix in the day. And really, it's a minhag at the end of the day. Bottom line, we have, the Gzeira is that it should be treated exactly like Yom Tov Rishon. And therefore, for all intents and purposes, there are a few exceptions, halachically. We treat it as exactly the same, even though there might be room halachically on a svara level to start being lenient on certain questions. We are not, even though you have a good case to be. Okay. For example, by the way, any like suffix d'Rabbanan usually say suffix d'Rabbanan lakula. We don't say that by Yom Tov Sheni. Yom Tov Sheni is a different animal because of how the Gzeira was set up. Okay. Let's take a look here at the Rama. Aval kodem shlosha yamim shari. Prior to 3 days, early in the week, basically, it is mutter to set sail on Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, without any conditions. You can go for whatever reason. Afilu b'sfina shemosh chenota al yedei habehemos. Even if the animals are pulling the boat, they're on the shore, they're pulling on the side, and the animals are, the boat is in the water. Even if you don't have those 10 tefachim, they need to be, with a tchum issue. And even if afterwards the Jew is going to have to do malacha once Shabbos does come, in order to continue the journey. This is a very important point, not so much that we'll see in the Mishnah Berurah in a moment. This is less important, by the way, with regards to this whole halacha than it is about other things. As I mentioned last week, elective surgeries. This is a practical halacha. A lot of times on elective surgery, you're going to have issues that you're going to have to deal with on Saturday. To treat whatever the wound, you're going to have to maybe sometimes, things are being cut, things are being, whatever it is. You're also, forget Oneg Shabbos also is out the window. But sometimes you need to have, you just need to do certain things to help your body recuperate. And sometimes they involve things that maybe midrabanan, maybe midaraisa, but harder than midaraisa. But even midrabanan, we would say normally you shouldn't do on Shabbos. So the question is, how does this translate to other things? And I think actually in this sefer that I have, they bring it up. So we're going to mention it in just a moment. I just want to read the Mishnah Berurah first. Good. Vav. Afilu b'sfina. Road Salomar, Delone, rather than Halicha with Karon, the whole idea that the animals are pulling it on the side, we say that's okay also. It's not like a Karon, a wagon, where we say it's also to travel on Shabbos on the wagon. Even if you were sitting on the wagon on Monday, you started on the trip. Once Shabbos comes, you have to get off. You can't be on a wagon trip. And we'll see later in this siman why that's the case. As he says here, that it was normal, apparently. I didn't know this until you all taught me this last week. It's normal to pull boats on the river using animals on the side of the river to help pull the boat. Even in such a situation, even within 3 days, it is permissible to set sail. Were it for its bar mitzvah. He mentions here with the early part of the week, because more generally he was talking about boats in the beginning of the week, but really it would be permissible to set sail on a Thursday or Friday for a bar mitzvah with a boat that is being pulled by animals. There's no reason to differentiate. The karon is going to be a bigger problem because that'll be a tchum issue also to be traveling on a wagon on Shabbos. Again, with the boats, you have other, that kula of the tchum doesn't apply when you have a certain depth. So, anyways, that's why it's permissible even within 3 days. There's not 10 tvachim. The havamina, the asr mishum tchumin. We have a thought in our mind that it should be prohibited because of the issue of tchum. Kamash malandalo. So ultimately, the answer is that's not the case. The reason is The reason is because if I set sail in the early part of the week, the first 3 days of the week, we'll see in a moment, I don't the that will happen on Shabbos when I do that. I'll repeat that. I don't have to consider the consequences of what will happen now that I'm in a situation, because I set sail. I set, once you're in the middle of the ocean, you're in the middle of the ocean. There's no like, oh, well, on Shabbos, I'll just, pretend I don't have to do anything. You might have to do things on Shabbos that will require violating a D'oraisa, because, you're in the middle of the ocean. You have to take care of your life. Pikuach nefesh matters. But you can put yourself in a pikuach nefesh situation on a Monday. Thursday, you can't do that, but Monday, you could do that. So here, same thing. We're not worried about violating the Isser of Tchum when it's Monday. If you're going to put yourself in a situation where you're going to violate Tchum on a Monday, it's not something you have to put into your calculations.
Even if you know you're.
Even if you know. It's shocking. You are basically putting yourself in a situation where you know you're going to violate an Isser. But that's how strong this principle is, that you don't have to worry about next Shabbos until Tuesday night. Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, you're not shayach to next Shabbos. You can still make Havdalah for the previous Shabbos. So that's the principle of the Baal Amor, and you see it's playing out here. That's why I said this is in the background of this simon. Again, that rule can be applied more generally. I believe that's a more generic rule. That's not just this halacha. So this is even when in a place where this says this is the point here, even where you're going to have to violate other malachos to keep the boat moving on Saturday, because you can't just, you can't go all Titanic on the situation. You can't just like crash into an iceberg and be, I'm sorry, iceberg coming up, but it's Shabbos. I can't start, what am I supposed to do? It's Yahari Val Yavor. It's not a Yahari Val Yavor. You can't. Of course, you have to do certain things on Shabbos. Hatam Kamoshe Kasabin Lamala. The reason is, as we wrote above, the 3 days before Shabbos are shayach to the coming Shabbos. So I have to be careful about Mechal Shabbos, those 3 days prior to Shabbos. And when you set sail on those 3 days, it's like I stipulated, I am going to violate Shabbos. I'm already in the realm of thinking about Shabbos. Halachically, I'm connected to the coming Shabbos, and I am basically saying, I don't care about Shabbos. I'm going to violate Shabbos. I'm stipulating from the get-go, I'm going to violate Shabbos. Before that time, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, the previous Shabbos is what I'm relevant to. Since I set sail in a time which is permissible, I don't need to worry about next Shabbos. It doesn't have to factor into my calculation. It's not on my mind, halachically. And then if something happens, I'm putting myself in a situation where there's a little bit of a danger. And I now need to violate Shabbos. It's not chilul Shabbos. I'm allowed to put myself in a situation where I'll have to violate Shabbos to save myself. I'm in a sakana in order, and yes, it's true, violating Shabbos. It's okay, it's motor. It's really fascinating, right? I like Imam the Sivkot on Chaf Hey, take, hold your horses until Chaf Hey, or he talks about this again. Chaf Hey, all he just says is, even if you're being Mechal Shabbos on an Issa D'Rabbanan, the situation there is going to be you're going to travel through the desert, and everybody knows you're going to have to violate Shabbos in order to get through the desert, because there's a sakana, right? It's a sakana to travel through the desert, certainly by yourself, and whatever. Same halacha applies. Shlosh Kodem Shabbos, it's prohibited. The early part of the week, it's mutter, and if you have a sakana, so you could violate Shabbos. Not a problem at all. So. This is the halacha. I wanted to share with you a couple more points here before we stop. We'll continue the Mishnah Berurah next week. I want to show you some of the comments that I see on the side of my Deer Shoe edition. He says here, the boats that in terms of this halacha, he says here, quoting the Igros Moshe, Shebesfino shel yameinu, the boats of our days, im ein efsharus b'yedei hanosei lahamin et hasina b'Shabbos, mutar linsoa ba af im manhigei haYehudim. Hamalachos imikomakom lo yahanim min hamalachos she'osei Yisrael avro. Meaning, if, let's say, even if it's a Jewish, it's interesting, even if it's a Jewish-run boat on Shabbos, but they're for many people, they're not doing it just specifically for me whenever they do whatever issur they're doing. So he says here that it would be permissible to be on such a boat, which is just an interesting. He's talking from the beginning of the week. Yeah, if you travel at the beginning of the week on such a boat, even if it's a Jew who's doing it, it would be technically okay because for many other people, right? They're already violating it. The question is here, you can't. But the other problem is that you can't actually directly benefit from one of those malachos. So it's just very hard, very tricky. So if, let's say that the Jew lights a fire. Or they turn on all the lights, right? So that's very tricky. So he says it's kedai to try to avoid a ship that's being run by a Jew. I don't know if any of these cruise liners which have the Shabbos, whatever, they're running by Jews. I don't know, but you have to be very careful about that. That's one point. And where's the other points that he wants to make here? He points out here, if you're traveling by train, chashmalit means like an electric car, electric train. I don't know if anybody knows what that word in here. I didn't look it up. Bottom line, if you're traveling by train, the Chasam Sofer says it's prohibited.
It's a streetcar.
Streetcar, yeah. It's us according to the Chasam Sofer. He had already trains in his days, the Chasam Sofer. Why? Because it's an issue of tchum. There you can't say you're that far above ground level. But what about the train? You walk up on the train. It's more than 3 feet up in the air. He says when you have a rochav of tesfachim, the space, the physical space of the train is a little bit too big. He starts. This is where you're more machmir on tchum. So it's also lalot al rekavot on trains, even 3 days before Shabbos. If you're going to end up being on the train on Shabbos. Again, early in the week, different story. We'll talk about that more. But late in the week, you're not supposed to travel on a train that's going to continue traveling on Shabbos. He writes here, not the Chasam Sofer, but he writes here, V'chein le'inyan tisa b'matos, a flight. Al yedei nochri. Obviously, you have to assume it's being by a non-Jew. I don't know how that works. So they'll say Elal. I don't know. Elal, you can make such assumptions that it's a non-Jew flying the plane. So the Minchas Yitzchak writes, "Sha'af im yaschil atus lifnei haShabbos." You get on the plane before Shabbos. As Steve pointed out, there's no tchum up in the 30,000 feet in the air. So asr lasas came. Why? Hein mishum tsar hatisa. The pain of traveling, the turbulence, the pressure in your ear. You land and then you still have that thing, that bubble in your ear that you just can't get rid of. You're just like you're squeezing it out. Shekasav or Ramban, the Ramban says it's asur min Torah, to have such. The Ramban doesn't say it's literally asur min Torah to have the tsar, but you're supposed to. If you're putting yourself in a situation where you don't enjoy Shabbos, it feels like you violated the positive of resting on Shabbos. Anyways, and he says, by the way, you're benefiting from the malacha that the Nochri is doing, because to fly a plane requires an engine, and to have an engine requires some, fuel, and you have a little. It's like almost a little fiery sparks. It's like a car. You're not getting away with that. So, bottom line is, an airplane. You're supposed to make sure that you're not going to have a landing time on Shabbos. With regards to the,
you're not going to have a landing time on Shabbos, so you're not going to be on board on Shabbos flying.
You need to make sure you're landing before Shabbos.
Before
You can't
Shabbos,
get on the plane before Shabbos and know that the plane's going to land on Shabbos where you're going. That needs to be Shabbos. We'll see again in a moment, probably next week, excuse me. We'll see a lot of these change because of the reality of how quick our travel is. The Gemara already acknowledges if you can make it in one day, it's a mitzor letzidon is a one-day travel up the coast of the Mediterranean. And the Gemara says it's mutter. So what if today you could get on a plane, go from here to Chicago, in 3 hours, you fly at 9 in the morning, you land by 12. So the post could say it's mutter. It's mutter. When is it a problem? It's a problem if you leave at a time when realistically you're not going to make it to your destination before Shabbos. You could even be lenient and say, what if the winds are blowing in the right way with a ship? So you could say, what if you have a tailwind, and if you have a good tailwind, you'll get there, fast enough. So maybe we can be lenient, but you really have to set yourself up in a situation where not just, I would say that you land before Shabbos, but that you get to where you're going before Shabbos. Because if you're going to end up in the airport on Shabbos, that's a bit leave enough time. So that means if you have a flight delay on a Friday, he talks about this with the boats. If the boat gets delayed on a Friday, we'll see next week. You have to start to be, to measure in your head, can I realistically get where I'm going before Shabbos? If it's not realistic, sorry, I lost you for a moment there. We're going to pause here. We'll continue next week. I wish everybody a good day. Take care.